Well, thank you everyone for joining. For those that are new to these sessions, these are really opportunities for schools to ask questions, learn from each other, share successes. I am coming from Wavelength. We are a software alumni data and strategy platform and engagement platform. So we always just provide a few strategic ideas and materials that we'll share out at the end of this call. So I always have structured strategy to support you with on calls like this, but we also can be directed and change our conversation depending on what questions or topics we want to make sure to cover today. If you have questions as we're talking, please feel free, raise your hand, interrupt, ask questions, provide feedback, or you can always put them in the chat if you don't want to talk. Today's session, we're really focusing on what engagement can look like outside of in-person events that are typically held at your school. I think a lot of schools have, events have been around forever, and being able to host events at your school, that's really powerful, but it's also sometimes limiting for those who might not be geographically close. It's also expensive for you all to try and make sure that the events are ranging in a wide variety to allow you to have, various alumni in various life stages be interested in said event. So the hope here is to really identify, what does engagement look like? How do you define engagement and track it? And what are some new ideas that you could take back with you to your school as you think through other opportunities your alumni might be interested in? So again, feel free to interrupt at any time, but I first wanted to take a step back from alumni and put it in the perspective of what engagement can look like as a school community at large. So I'm going to just start sharing my screen. Is everyone able to see the community engagement PowerPoint I've got right now? Seeing
Yes.
nodding heads. Yes, thank you. Okay. So essentially the concept of this flywheel, and again, we're going to share this out and it might look a little complex right now, but essentially the intent behind our vision of community engagement is just how interconnected everyone truly is with your school. So when it comes to the lower left corner, that general awareness section, this is thinking about anyone who's in the general vicinity of your school, who, drives by, knows the name of your school, or maybe you're boarding, or people might know it from afar just as they're searching lists of, best schools doing XYZ. That general awareness really comes from marketing. And so when it comes to the alumni perspective, alumni spotlights, highlights are very easily brought into your marketing and collateral as people start to learn about your school. You then have recognition. So this is where people not only know the name of your school, but they might have some fun facts about it. They might know a little bit more about it. Not only is it a school they're driving by, but oh, that's, such and such independent school. They're really focused on STEM, or this is a K-8 school, whatever it might be. It's beyond just name recognition. Then you've got members in your school community that start to have this evaluation. And while we say admissions here, it could also mean, job evaluators thinking about working at your school, to evaluation of your alumni, even thinking about donating back to your school. So it's this cyclical experience that people have around your school, which is like the center spoke here. Then you've got actual participants. And these participants are family, students, faculty. Then you get that outer circle of people who might not be in your brick and mortar, actual physical building, but they are still community members, from alumni to family of alum to former faculty. Now, all of these members are interconnected. So they all overlap with each other. So when you think of an alum, you want them to have relationships with the school. And what does that mean? Is that with current students? Is that with them connecting with each other? Is that them interconnecting back with faculty members or former faculty members? And an alum might be wearing their school swag, and somebody might start recognizing that school from afar because they start seeing other people repping your school beyond just your physical address. So the intent of me introducing this concept to you is so that you can see just how interconnected everyone truly is. And you probably have a lot of engagement opportunities that already exist, and you simply need to just loop alumni into what you have already offering as a school. This does mean a lot more cross-departmental awareness and collaboration, perhaps, but at the same time, it also allows you to be taking advantage of what already exists and what's already in motion and just looping the right people in at the right time. I have a perfect example for you of just what a alum used in marketing collateral did. So I am a board game fan, play games with the family and friends. My brother introduced me to a new game. I mentioned it to another friend of mine who I know also likes games, and she's like, "Oh, that's actually designed by an alum from my school." She then sends me the magazine, the school's magazine's article on this ornithologist turned board game creator profile. And again, I never attended this school, but that article was so interesting that I then spread that article to all of the people that I have played the game with. And that has since been able to be spread out, all because of a single school profile about a cool initiative an alum did. And if you think about the potential spreading of communication around, brand awareness of a school simply because they highlighted some cool initiatives alumni are doing, there's a real opportunity just to profile alumni and the exciting efforts they're doing. It doesn't need to be that they're, the next CEO of some amazing tech startup. It could be, but it also could be people doing really interesting things in their community, and that's how you spread awareness about your school. That's how alumni feel celebrated, and it shows that you are celebrating and tracking the success of your students well beyond them graduating your actual school. So before I dive deeper into some more ideas around actual alumni engagement, knowing that some of it's going to be based on this kind of visual and concept, are there any questions around this flywheel in particular?
I'm not going to stop until.
And if not, I can just jump right in then. Excellent. So when we're thinking about engagement, obviously, there are a lot of different ways that you can engage with an individual, but one of the most challenging parts is if you don't have strong data on your constituents. Because if you have missing data, and I'm just going to jump ahead again, we're going to share all of this, but if you have bad data, it prevents you from being able to do those marketing stories, to actually having alumni be able to support mentoring opportunities with current students. It is easiest to lose data on those that have departed your school, but it's that same data and those same people that could actually be really impactful and powerful. So I just had an experience with an organization we work with that hadn't been tracking data for some time, and then they were regathering data and were using class officers to help fundraise. And so they linked a lawyer volunteer with a lawyer fundraiser, and they started to talk. And this volunteer, who was just a classmate, all of a sudden learned that this alum actually was one of the top 5 creators and people at AOL before it was sold. Can you imagine the lost opportunity of some really successful alums if you don't track them from the start? And all the school had was that he's a current lawyer because he changed career paths after that original sale happened. And so what you really want to think through is, what are the steps that you have to track your data from the start and maintain the data over time? This also is a really great call out of, I don't know what systems you all use, but it would be valuable to track not only current career, but also previous. So having information not only on current, but maybe holding that information from the past to have more personalized contact points with people is really essential. So what you want to think about is, before we even consider, hey, here are some engagement ideas, do you even have contactable information on your alumni, or do you have personal information on them beyond an email so you can actually really reach out with intent or with purpose around why are you trying to bring them in? What's lovely about events is that oftentimes you can have events that apply to a lot of people, they're conversing with each other, but when you start doing more targeted engagement that we're going to discuss down the line, the best approach is to have a little bit more personalization. So targeting people by, if you're wanting to have volunteers in a mentorship program, then you're wanting to bring the right people in. So making sure you're not asking only people in finance and consulting to mentor, but those that might be in career paths like the arts, education, whatever it might be, so that your current students who are seeking mentors, or your young alumni in college who are seeking mentors, feel like they are part of a community beyond just the typical industries covered. So again, it goes back to, let's have data to help make sure we're personalizing our outreach and asking the right people to come participate. Beyond having strong data practices, and that's everywhere from the contact information to the personalization of where they are today. It's also being able to track what they have going on at your school. If you have, sports initiatives or people that were part of your school magazine or part of your arts or whatever other initiatives you have, that trackable data shouldn't be lost, because those are identifying points that a lot of people have. We find that our schools who fundraise with targeted efforts beyond just, the capital campaigns or the annual funds, and are reaching out to those who, are part of the arts and saying, hey, we really want to create a new stage. Do you want to support? Here are some updates of recent plays that were going on. If you target your messaging to individuals because of your personalized knowledge of them, they're more willing to actually donate or get involved in general. So that's why we really highlight the more data, the better. And from a tracking perspective, and I'll go into this later on in the call, there's actually a lot of ways that you can take your data and visualize it, no matter what database you have. So we've gone through, hey, alumni can do a whole lot. We're going to go into what that actual lot is, but first you need the data. On top of that, what we want to also think through is what's trackable when it comes to how you actually think through visually, or even like however you want to track it. You really want to think through what it means to define engagement and how you can track the success of it. This is just our platform here. We've got a quick bar here of like email open rates. This is all fake data, but like sign-ins to a portal, to user updates and their activity. You want to make sure that any sort of engagement points, whether it's online, social media, emails, events, you really want to track the data to understand what is going on. And sorry, my dog's making some noises under me, so if he's too loud, just let me know. He's chewing a bone right now. So the key with tracking data and engagement is actually understanding the data rates and the success rates that you're thinking about. So let's say you're trying to understand like attendance rates or email open rates. You're not actually basing it off the total number of alumni that you have, or you have to really understand what the reports are saying to you, because what email open rates might be are actually, here are the number of people you emailed, and these are the number of people that opened those emails. So it's not 44% opened out of your entire alumni base, it's 44% of those that actually received an email. And that's actually even further detailed than just saying, okay, I have so many recipients, here were how many were processed. So again, what you want to really understand with your data is I sent this many emails out. Only out of the 100 emails I sent, only 90 were delivered because I got 10 bad emails. And then of those 90, I had X percentage open rates. So what you really want to think through when you're looking at whatever CRM, whatever systems you're using is when you're looking at the reports, what is it actually reporting on? Because some of those percentages can be confusing. So when you're saying, oh, it's 44% open rate, make sure you know what that open rate is referring to. So let's talk through what engagement can look like outside of volunteering. And I'll start sharing my screen for some other visuals in a little bit, but you really can bucket it into a few different areas. And it can either be by quote unquote channel, which is, is it social media? Is it text and content? Is it physical events? Is it online Zoom hangouts? There are so many different buckets you can kind of try and identify the engagement to be. The other idea around engagement is if it's not events, it's, these are touch points with thinking about to the flywheel. Is it touch points with current students? Is it alumni engaging with alumni? Is it alumni engaging with staff? And which direction is it going rather? So are alumni being contacted by you as a school? Are alumni being contacted by fellow alumni? Are you empowering them to connect with each other? And so it's ways, what you really want to think about in these buckets is what's your priority? Because there's so many different opportunities there to engage. And we all know you all are wearing multiple hats. Where do you really want to prioritize your efforts? There are a gazillion platforms out there. I know that I had some schools testing like, oh, what if, because we can't do in-person events during COVID, there are platforms that allow you to have like classrooms that you can switch between and sit in different rooms with different people. So we'll do a remote reunion. There's so many different tech support options, but also like in-person opportunities that you really need to identify what's the lift. And what's the lift being, what's the amount of effort it takes you to deliver on this engagement? What's the cost of it? And what's the alumni experience? There's a really interesting, there's an interesting graph that I'm sorry I don't have actually live time pulled up here, but it's really trying to, it's basically a graph on impact versus effort. And you're trying to find this sweet spot of how many people am I impacting with this engagement to how much effort is it going to take me and the team to deliver on this idea. And I'll share this graph in the email follow-up. But what you want to focus on is that sweet spot of if you are putting in so much time and effort to host this individual online experience, but only 5 to 10 alum are experiencing it, is that better or worse than, doing a lot of article and social media campaigns that's kind of getting the word out there to a larger base, but might have less engagement? I'm not going to have the answer for you, and that's really going to depend on the other initiatives at your school and what your goals are, but you really want to weigh your efforts of where am I going to put my time and money to how many people are being impacted by this initiative in particular. I've done a lot of talking right now. Is there any questions or follow-up or ideas that have been triggered as I've shared anything? All right, so then when you're thinking about this effort and like the impact, what you need to consider with engagement is the life stages of your alumni as well. So every initiative that you're going to think of from an engagement standpoint is not going to be relevant to every single alum of yours, be it because of their geographical location of I can't be there, to I am a young alum prioritizing my college experience right now, really not interested in XYZ. So what you want to think about, and I've mentioned this in previous calls, similar to having a marketing calendar year round of, what are the touch points you have with your alumni, both from your office, but maybe the entire school sending out communications. You also want to think about what type of events that you're offering today and which personas or identities are you missing from being able to experience what you're offering. So if you all of a sudden realize, wow, we've got a lot of formal events. So that's maybe award ceremonies to reunions, to whatever other celebrations it is, but it's targeting major donors or those that are local, or it's more formal. So it's sit down. There are people who might not be comfortable or interested in that, or may never be invited because they aren't at that level of giving, or they were not that level of, sports to be brought back in for award ceremonies or whatever it might be. So what you want to identify is what groups are missing right now. I encourage our schools to have different personas, as I mentioned, just thinking through the type of individuals that their alumni base are. You've got, and it's pretty easy to kind of bucket, you know them already, you just haven't formally written them down yet. I'll provide like a little persona graphic as well when I'm sharing out my materials, but you have ideas of what life stage, how much time and effort they have to like re-engage with a school, like what their priorities are. And what you really want to think through is you can't take anything to heart about, oh, we have like low activity here. Why aren't more participating? Everyone has their own, life that they're living. And even if they want to attend, they might not be able to. So that's the limitation.
12, but go ahead.
That's the limitation sometimes with the events in person. So let's think through the channels, the buckets that I mentioned around engagement strategy outside of in-person school events. One is online. You've got social media where you're fighting for space, to be quite honest. There's a lot of, it's important to be there, but if you think about your own social media experience, you're logging in and how many notifications are there? You're looking at personal updates from everyone else. And then you're also looking at the organizations that are also posting initiatives. And if they don't happen to look at the post at the right time, it's happening while they're scrolling, and there's a really finite amount of time you have to capture their attention. So you need to be present, but at the same time, that shouldn't be the only experience and content you're providing to your alumni base. So you've got social media from a technology standpoint. You've got email. So from an email perspective, there are a few ways they might be receiving an email from you. It might be a newsletter from like an alumni focus. You might have an online digital magazine, or it could be targeted messages like class officers that are trying to gather people for pre-reunion, drinks before the formal school events, or it's you all sending out direct communication. Direct communication can be really valuable, but again, from that scalability standpoint, you want to think through what capabilities you have. There are a lot of email channels, and it depends on which services you have, but most marketing will have a capability to do a mail merge. So you're literally sending a personalized message to people, but you're creating one email, but it's going out to whatever subgroup of recipients you're thinking about. So it's hi, first name, and you really want to be thinking about that personalization so that while you're doing a mass email, it sounds that much more relevant to the individual. So one example is not only just like hi, first name, we're celebrating a certain class year with these upcoming reunions. Again, you're sending one email to every alum who's attending the reunion, and they're experiencing the personalization that you have here. So what you want to do is think through, can I personalize in a way that isn't going to have me sending individual emails to everyone. I've mentioned this in the past in previous calls around sports being a pretty easy lift of having coaches write up seasonal updates and sending to just the soccer team, and this is where if you track the data, you would be able to potentially have this, is I want to email everyone who is part of the soccer team an update stating how the season went. So having personal engagement, when you're thinking technology, social media, that's a generic message that's hitting people beyond alumni, unless it's like a private Facebook group or whatever private groups you might have. You've got email, which can be mass emailed out, but there are personalization tools that exist across various email programs. We really encourage mail merge, even if you're sending out a newsletter, because the newsletter can just be that hi first name newsletter information, and it just makes them actually read it a little bit more. So you've got email, you've got social media, you have also the ability to do online Zooms like we're doing today, where you've got people interested in engaging with each other or wanting to have things like fireside chats of, can I listen to a faculty member who I adored, and maybe it's a former faculty member talking about, some new initiative that they're doing outside of the classroom. The faculty is a really large part and relationship that students have back to the school, and it's one where I have worked with schools who say faculty are really happy to reconnect with their former students, and it also allows the alumni to connect. Yes, Jessica, there will be recording and slideshow. I'll be sharing everything that we talk about on the call today. So when it comes to faculty relationships, fireside chat, just having like a conversation with current, former faculty, allowing students and alumni to ask questions in the chat or send questions in beforehand. It's really useful to have people beyond yourself be the voice of the school. And also beyond just the head of school. They're going to hear communications from the head of school. They're going to see, leadership, and they want to hear from them, but that's not what they remember. Those aren't the same figureheads that were at their school when they attended. And it's the faculty or the projects and initiatives that were happening on campus that have evolved over time that they really are going to have the closest memories with. And when we say engagement, ultimately the end goal of engagement is a really strong relationship with the school, thereby allowing fundraising to be that much easier. So you've got social media, you've got the emailing. I obviously come in with the angle of having an online engagement tool. That's what our platform's all about. We're really focused on letting alumni connect with alumni on their own. So it's being empowered to say, hey, I'm going to Chicago on a business trip. Is anyone in my class there? Or, it's really fun. These schools are playing each other. Let me go and email those that live around me and say, hey, let's do, a tailgate or cheer on the team. Or it might be a networking opportunity too of, I am trying a career shift. Do I know anyone in this new industry? I can ask for a coffee chat. So online portals allow alumni to connect on their own with each other and meet them where and when they're ready to connect. It allows you to be sending out emails while also letting people engage with the school in their own way. So what our platform also has is like a content page. So it would be like alumni specific content that isn't just posted on social media. So from a tech perspective, you've got Zooms, the newsletters, the emails, the social media, maybe a private platform. But there's a lot of opportunities to, outside of technology and outside of events that happen right at your school. What you want to think about is how you can empower alumni to be connecting with each other, and also how you can be empowering alumni to connect and feel like they are supporting the school, even if it's not from a donations perspective. So we have a lot of schools who do senior projects or want to support young alumni in internships, this is where you can loop alumni into saying, hey, we really are interested in having you, support a student, or would you be willing to provide advice at career day? These are all touch points where they don't have to be physically present, but they feel connected with your school ultimately, because they feel seen as what they're doing as an initiative in their life is important enough that you want it to be shared out. One way to do this is actually through class note collection. So when that happens, you're able to reach out to people, say, do you have updates about your life? We want to capture them and highlight them in, newsletter form or in this magazine, or just trying to say, we want to celebrate you. Do you have any life updates? This allows people to self-select in sharing photos, life updates, but it might be updates that you never considered to be important, but because it's important to them, you can recognize, wow, this is a great initiative or a new chapter that they're in, and people want to hear from each other. So a lot of times, and back to the data front, our schools will focus on, if we're doing class note collection, make sure you're also confirming people's data. And rather than having just a form on your website, because that's another place where you can have alumni information, what you want to do is actually have inbound into their inboxes a visual representation of the data they have, saying, hi, Katie, this is the information we have on file. We're trying to send this upcoming newsletter. Want to make sure this is all accurate. Oh, by the way, do you have any class note updates you want to share with us? What I've neglected to mention through all of this is the power of volunteers, because there actually might be more response if a classmate sends that message out compared to the school itself. So having a classmate reach out saying, hey, Katie, like really excited about upcoming reunions, or I'm, class captain, hope you're doing well. We're trying to do some updates. Would you mind providing them? I have the name recognition of a classmate over perhaps you're a new hire or new to role and weren't there when I was at school. There's familiarity if I hear from a classmate that I can perhaps want to chat with. Volunteering is a whole nother bucket of engagement. We did a session around volunteering. If people are interested, I can share the materials from that session as well. But when it comes to volunteering, you don't want just anyone. And you want to be very clear on what volunteering is, because you might have people who are I'm a cheerleader for your school, but I'm not a true volunteer. I'm not putting in all that time, or I want to say I'm a volunteer, but I'm actually not going to sign up to support in any of these initiatives. So volunteers are really helpful. Now, how do you get volunteers? It's actually through identifying those who are more engaged. So when you're thinking about your engagement ideas outside of events, again, I go back to the data. All of the systems you have today likely have this information. It's just pulling it out in a spreadsheet and finding it. But essentially, you can actually see who might be more engaged because they've been, responding to emails, or they've been socially engaged on your Facebook or whatever it is. If you have someone who is more active and engaged with the offerings you're already providing, they are likely to be a stronger volunteer because they're already showing interest. This is another visual we've gone through in the past, but it's really focused on your engagement pyramid, where you have people moving through various levels of engagement with your school. You've got those who are disengaged. We really like to call out those might be disengaged just because they're unaware. They don't know what's happening because you've lost touch with them. But if you did have their contact information, they'd want to participate. You've got the sporadic of, hey, if I'm home visiting my parents for the holidays, I'll stop by that bar event you're hosting. Those that are committed are, I'm going to be loyally going to the events if I can. I'm interested, like I'm going to give regularly. And then you've got the loyal who are diehard school fans who want to be on your alumni council, who if you ask them to help out, they're going to help out. But you have to realize that there's going to be movement between all of these engagement levels, where some people might be committed and then become sporadic because they've just had a bunch of kids, but they'll be committed, years down the line. So when it comes to identifying volunteers, you need to know where they are in this pyramid of, are they a right fit for what you're trying to deliver on? But volunteers who are communicating with their classmates, they are also great representatives of their classmates, of being able to be their voice. But I will say, with a warning, there's a little caveat there, is oftentimes if they're already very loyal and committed, they may neglect to remember when they weren't engaged with your school, of like, oh yeah, they'd love this, but they might not be thinking about the full representation of all of your spectrum of alumni and where they stand in a relationship with you. Before I continue, are there any questions about what I've shared today, or anything that you feel like you as a school have experienced that's been successful, or have questions you want to make sure we cover? Great. So when it comes to outside of events, we've talked technology, we've talked volunteers. What I haven't mentioned is this bucket of, you're going to have alumni who become parents who are local, or if you are a boarding school, they also might be dispersed, but they're going to be part back to this community engagement flywheel of, they're going to be restarting the cycle again of where do they stand as they think through sending their kid off to school, or they are an alum and a current parent. Maybe they're sending their kid to school. They are both an alum and a parent. What you want to think through is what that experience is like, and how you can support someone who is in the school searching phase, as well as current parent phase, because that's a whole nother level of engagement where you don't want to be, you're not going to be the only department that is communicating with them or asking for their support, especially if they're a current parent. But at the same time, there's huge value in them telling their stories. They attended your school. They are sending their kid to your school, or considering sending their kid to your school. Those are really useful anecdotes back to thinking around marketing initiatives, to the power of learning from peers. An example, we work with a lot of K-8 schools who have their current parents and parents who are, parent of alumni, still being able to connect with each other so that they can support their student going off to high school. What was the transition like going to XYZ school? How did you choose that school over another one? Allowing people to connect with each other because of the shared and like the shared data points that they have is going to be really useful for them to feel like they're learning from each other, and back to being seen as an individual. I'm not just a stat. I'm not just an alum that fits into the thousands of other alumni you have. It's an understanding of, no, you see me in my own journey. And a lot of people, from a recognition standpoint of being seen as, I am an alum doing this career initiative, or and in this chapter of my life, it makes them feel like they aren't just a statistic. And with that, it really helps with, they feel recognized, and it's kind of a pat on the back of, you didn't have to do anything in terms of monetary value to them. You didn't have to give them items, you didn't have to host an event. All you had to do was communicate with them. It's a quick email, it's a phone call, it's a check-in, it's, letting people connect with each other. What you're really trying to do is allow alumni to have touch points that might be less formal than an actual event. So I've been talking for about 40 minutes about a bunch of different things. It's hard to really identify, when it comes to engagement, what is best for every school. It's not a one size fits all answer. So what you really want to do from your standpoint, what I encourage you to think through is get a state of the state. Understand, what am I offering today? And how is it being offered throughout the year? Are there kind of dead zones of quiet periods? Are we okay with those quiet periods? Should we be filling that with some other engagement opportunities? Are all of the engagement opportunities fundraising related? Is there a way that we can expand that so it doesn't seem like we're only asking for money, but promoting community? And are we targeting a wide range of alumni as we're offering these events? Does this interest a wide variety of alumni, no matter where they are in their life stage, no matter how old they are? So as you're thinking through what your baseline is, then you want to think through, what's my vision of the future? First of all, I always like to do a brainstorming event where there's absolutely no restrictions. Like, money's not the issue, staffing's not the issue. Pie in the sky, what do you want? What's ideal for you? And as you throw out those ideas, it gets a little exciting. And then it also makes you realize, actually, these could be obtainable if I make these into step projects. So step one is, maybe I can't have local events in hotspot areas of where alumni are in various cities across the US. But I do know that the city that's an hour away from my school, we could actually host something that's pretty reasonable this year. And if that goes successfully, we could maybe expand it to 2 other locations next year. Or I want to start a volunteer initiative where we've got some mentors helping young alumni out. Let's start with the focus on just like this specific industry or this specific initiative of, we've got some volunteers happy to review resumes and cover letters. Then you expand it into a larger volunteer program. It's all about those baby steps. And when it comes to engagement, again, back to the basics, what are you tracking today? What can you be tracking today? And what should you be tracking? And that's going to help you be able to identify, is your engagement improving? Are my email open rates improving? Is my attendance improving? Is, like, in terms of updates and contact points with alumni, is that increasing? You're going to have various goals, but you really want those clear definitions for yourself, for your team, and so that leadership understands you hitting these milestones. So definitions are key. And from a data perspective, making sure, and I'm going to go back to sharing the email stats visual that I had talked about before, because it's like a pretty good example of what we're talking about here. So if you're thinking about improving your data health, I've got, X amount of emails total out of my entire alumni base. Your email open rates are going to be based on the number of email profiles that you have. It's not based out of your entire alumni base. So what you're really trying to think through is, okay, what is the statistic I'm looking at? And what type of engagement can I do to have this change? So one engagement dilemma is, I don't have contact information. Therefore, I can't even have 50% of my base know that this exists. What data initiative am I doing to get contactable information so that I can simply try and improve my outreach? Or is it, you've got a physical magazine mailer and you're trying to send them out to your alumni? What percentage do you have a mailing base for? Can you have a digital version? Because there might be a percentage of mailing addresses that you don't have, but you do have for email. So everyone can still receive it, even if you don't have their physical mailing address. On top of that, do you have a website that can house it so that if you have any inbound traffic where you didn't have a mailing address on a person, you didn't have an email, someone could still find it if they're interested? So that, on that off chance that they can send an article saying, hey, have you seen this? There's a digital version of it for them. So again, as you're thinking about your own engagement tactics, you want to think through, technology exists out there that can support you outside of physical events. Your data can support you in identifying what you should be doing. And from the tech side, there are a lot of free options out there. There's also a variety of opportunities of different, initiatives you can prioritize. You need to think through, my biggest goal is, a volunteer initiative, or allowing alumni to connect with alumni, or I really want to, have a way to share out information and have like a content hub that isn't going to be visible to the larger population or to non-alumni. As you are thinking through your technology, the key is, what are the key features that you want to have offered? What do you really want to make sure exists in terms of, this is the ultimate goal that I want. Think through the actual cost of it, of how much does it cost per alum that I'm trying to engage with, and what type of lift from a tech perspective do I need to know from an admin, of how easy is it for me to take on, and how easy will alumni be able to adapt to whatever technology I'm trying to deliver on. So thank you for listening.